In 2021, according to Gartner, the analytics platform market witnessed another double-digit growth and is now worth almost $30 billion. One company that has been innovating in the space is Thoughtspot. To learn the secret behind the growth of the analytics market and Thoughtspot, who better to educate us on this topic than Cindi Howson, Chief Data Strategy Officer at Thoughtspot. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of It Depends. My name is Sanjeev Mohan, and my guest is none other than Cindi Howson. Cindi has been a visionary in this space ever since I've known her. Not only is she an analyst and a strategist, but she has deep hands-on knowledge of this space. And her career, it has included Gartner, where we were colleagues. Now she's at Thoughtspot, where she runs a strategy team. Also, she's the host of the very successful The Data Chief podcast. With that, I will turn over to Cindi. We met up in London just 2 weeks ago at Big Data London, and she had just arrived from India. Thank you, Jet Setting Cindi, for joining us on this episode, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I'm very happy to be here with you. We also, maybe it's a distant memory now, but you and I also met at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando before that. So you two have been jet setting around.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, Cindi, I cannot do justice to your storied career. Can you please get us started?
I can't do justice to it either. I'm just a working girl who happened to fall in love with data and analytics early on at the right time. I actually almost left the industry too at one point and came back with a renewed focus after I got my MBA, and have been in this space now for 30 years. So how far back do you want me to go, Sanjeev?
I think this is great. Let's get into the depth, and I'm sure your background will shine through our questions today.
Okay.
Okay, great. So Cindi, the way I like to do it, talk about the market, overall market, then we go into the products, technologies, and we want to talk about Thoughtspot, and then we want to end up with some of your leadership principles.
Yeah, so the market is really at an interesting point in time. And I actually think we should overlay this with what is going on in the economy right now.
Yeah, very
Some
good point.
organizations are pulling back because it is a volatile economy. But one area that they are not pulling back, and I'm hearing this consistently around the world, I'd love to know your take. They are not pulling back on data, analytics, and AI investments because they are seeing that, one, it's the cost of doing business, but two, it truly is the competitive advantage in growing your revenues, operating efficiently, which you have to do in this volatile economy. So you quoted the size of the market. I also thought a huge validation of Thoughtspot's value proposition is that Gartner cited a statistic that 87% of organizations are either planning to adopt or have already adopted augmented analytics, a category that Thoughtspot pioneered, originally before I was here, but I was covering them as a startup, having launched in 2012. But releasing their first products in late 2014, early 2015.
So in this economy, are there new rules that we have to abide by?
Oh, yes. In fact, we would lay out, there's really 6 new rules. So we believe that this decade is the defining decade in data. And that makes me so happy because I've been going at it 30 years. Yes. And a proof point of this, besides the continued investments, is when I started in BI and analytics, I was just a report writer. And maybe there were departmental initiatives for BI at that time. Now we call it analytics. And I see how it's gone from departmental and backroom to really a boardroom conversation where boards are saying to their teams, how are you going to become data driven? How are we creating a data fluent workforce? And how are we monetizing our data, whether it's either creating data products or using it to serve customers better?
Mhm.
So in this defining decade of data, one of the things that Thoughtspot, we spoke about it at our user conference Beyond earlier in May, is 6 rules for organizations to pay attention to. The first one is that best of breed is finally possible as part of the modern data stack. You don't have to just buy from a single vendor or settle for good enough. It's really about best of breed. The second one is you have to democratize that data. So empowering every business person and data professional with true self-service analytics. So I don't mean teaching them SQL or Python or whatever. It's really easy to use analytics. The third one is operationalizing those insights. We'll call it insight to action. I know some in the industry are calling this decision intelligence. The fourth, that flexible data foundation. So you and I were at Big Data London. You heard us debate the pros and cons of the data mesh, the lakehouse, but it really is a flexible data foundation. Third-party data is critical as a competitive advantage. It gives you the early leading indicators to where the market is going, what your customers are buying, disruptions in the supply chain. And the last is that really data is now kind of the new UX as we create more data products. So those are the 6 rules, Sanjeev.
That is very interesting. So data is a new user experience. Does that mean like data products? So data, is that another way to look at it?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But even think about some of maybe your favorite apps that you order from, or your Fitbits, or what have you. It is using data to drive behavior. And I don't want to give too much away, but you'll hear from a guest on the Data Chief podcast in a
I see.
couple of weeks, the
Okay.
modern milkman.
Oh,
And they are embedding data insights in their app to actually tell customers what has been their impact in reducing garbage, plastic bottles. So cool. That's just one example.
all right. So we will look forward to that. So, Cindy, I remember ever since I've known you, you've been on a mission. And you were actually a bit aggravated many years ago that how the adoption of analytics was so low in
Yes.
companies, and you were on this mission to increase that adoption. How is this journey, and where are we these days?
Yes. So the journey remains mixed.
Oh, wow.
And one of the reasons why I did join Thoughtspot is because the company's mission to create a fact-driven world aligned, I think, to my personal mission that I believe a fact-driven world also is a better world.
Mhm.
Data can be used to make the world a better place, to help businesses operate efficiently. But when I was doing surveys, going back to my BI scorecard days,
Mhm.
or the survey results were in both books editions of Successful Business Intelligence, How to Unlock the Value of Big Data. And those industry surveys showed between a 20 and 25% adoption rate, meaning only 20 to 25% of employees within a company had access and could interact with this data. So a stale PowerPoint or a PDF, that is not good enough, because if I see, for example, that I have a stock out of a critical product, I don't want to just say, oh, darn, we're out of product. If I'm a merchandiser, I want to be able to look at, well, why are we out? Are sales up? Did we have a manufacturing issue? Did we have a storm? What other warehouses can I source this from? And then I do want to take action. I want to be able to source that and say, hey, ship your product from surplus B to out of stock A. To be able to do that, it has to be interactive. And so this is where, as an industry, we've not done a good job at empowering the non-analysts. We've done a very good job at empowering the experts, the data analysts, and yet we've created some other problems in that. So if I think about the evolution of analytics products, first generation, business objects, Cognos, that was pretty good at empowering professionals, sometimes more IT oriented. Second generation products like Spotfire, Power BI, Tableau were good at empowering the data analysts. And Thoughtspot is really about empowering the non-analysts.
I see.
So the needle has not moved as an industry.
Wow.
If I look, Wayne Eckerson, our friend, put out a survey earlier this year with Bark, and they are still showing just industry-wide an average of 25%. Now, we would say that's the tyranny of averages because you're looking at the industry, and yet when we look at the Thoughtspot customers, Vanguard recently spoke at a conference, and they shared, at least for a new use case they went after before the pandemic, 20%. And now after they deployed Thoughtspot, 70% adoption, and Schneider Electric quote similar high adoption rate. So when we have all customers really delivering that, then maybe we'll impact the industry overall.
So I have this crazy idea. I'm just wondering, should it be a part of every employee's annual bonus? Like, either personal or team bonus to use analytics. Like, do we need like a radically different strategy to increase that adoption?
Yes. However, I wouldn't want to take that as my incentive compensation if I were a manager, unless I put in place both the right tools, the people change management,
Correct.
the culture, and the enablement.
Yes.
So we've made some progress, but we've also made some mistakes. When you tell a business user, come take a full day training class, and I'm going to teach you a hard to use tool, they are far too busy for that. If I'm a merchandiser, if I'm a field seller, I don't want you doing that. I want you out there selling. Now, if I say, I'll stick with a salesperson example. If I say to the salesperson, come for 1 hour with your top 3 business questions on how you can better target your sales efforts and improve your commission. Now I'm talking about WIFM, what's in it for me. I'm not talking about the technology. I'm making it a small amount of time, and I'm giving them some actionable behavior. So you have to start with that. This is actually an approach that one of our customers, Frontify, is it Frontify? Yeah, Frontify uses. And Car Trawler. Sorry, Car Trawler. They do the rental cars in Europe that they use as part of launching the platform. So if you say, I'm going to put all that in place, then you could say, let's have the managers incentivized for driving self-service analytics. Yes. And data-driven decisions.
Yeah, I was just thinking, even for salespeople, go slow to go fast. So you take that day, 1 day to go learn the tool, and then, so talking about the tools. So the tyranny of the data and analytics space is that it's just getting micro-segmented. Every day there's now we've got metrics layer, now we've got reverse ETL, now we've got this, now we've got that. And then in each of those micro-segments, we get a plethora of products. But in the BI space, we've always had this problem. Ever since I remember, we've always had a ton of products. Why is it that we have so many products in the analytics space? And is that changing? Like any consolidation?
Yeah, is it changing? Do you remember how many vendors exhibited at Big Data London?
Yeah, just it was such a busy, the entire floor. Yeah.
170. Like,
Wow.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I remember when I joined Gartner, and I had BI scorecard. I was covering 15 vendors and in depth. And for me, in depth is hands-on testing,
Correct.
you know, customer reference checks, all of that. And probably another 10 like watching. I thought they were innovative, but I didn't have bandwidth to test them. And I think about the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So we're just looking at BI and analytics. They're
Mm-hmm.
limited to 20 dots, and there's probably another 10 cool vendors. Will they get traction? Are they solving a specific problem? So I think some things that have changed over time. One, we are still trying to tackle this problem of how to get data in the hands of every
Mm-hmm.
decision maker. And so even for Thoughtspot, we now have a lot of imitators. It's very validating on the one hand. Um, I don't know. It also frustrates me a little bit now working on the tech side. I'm like, can you just leave us we're solving this space. You go
Yeah.
solve something else. I
Yeah.
like co-opetition rather
It's
than
just noise.
competition.
There's so much
Yeah.
noise. You have to like constantly educate the market. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and I think why is this happening? So there's different problems still to be solved.
Mhm.
And then I think the cloud enables a lower barrier to entry and faster execution.
Exactly.
So you look at some of these categories that are still emerging, like data observability.
Yeah.
So I'm watching things like Monte Carlo,
Mhm.
metrics layer. Our CTO Amit Prakash wrote a fantastic blog on this. Is the industry even ready for this? And yet what we'd all like to get to is more reusability as
Mhm.
we define metrics and that transition time. I look at some other cool products, data cataloging, I
Mhm.
think is having its moment, and
Yes.
yet you might be on premises. So you're looking at Elation, or you might be in the cloud, which is newer for Elation, but is a sweet spot for Atlan. And so there's still so much innovation and yet distinct problems to be solved.
So when you, with all these products, what is a modern way of taking it a level down, parsing the space? Like how should we categorize or what are the subcategories in this space?
Oh gosh, Sanjeev, we don't have time to go through all those subcategories. Um, but I do think about it by workflow.
Yeah.
So how do you and I do think we need to talk about the operational systems.
Mhm.
When do you need to connect to that data, or so via modern APIs, or when do you actually need to extract it? So if
Mhm.
you're going to extract it, I'm thinking 5-tran Matillion. Um, if you're going to then transform it, and then orchestration, I might be thinking about airflow.
Yeah.
But
GPT. Yeah.
transformation, I'm
Yeah.
thinking in the modern cloud world, I'm thinking DBT.
Correct.
And notice I'm not saying
Right.
traditional products like SQL Server integration services or Informatica ETL. So I am thinking in the modern data stack, because you can do it faster, you can do more with less. These are all more low code, although DBT is still SQL based. And so now I have that transformation. Then I have where is my storage and my compute? So my storage might be in Snowflake or Databricks, or it might be, if you're using something like Starburst data, I might store it in a data lake and I'm using Starburst for the compute. And then where Thoughtspot fits is very much in the experience layer. If we're going to run a machine learning algorithm, we might integrate with something like Dataiku or Data Robot. So those are kind of the categories. You could add data observability, data cataloging, security. I like what Satori is doing and Amuda. So those would be the large categories by workflow.
Right. So Cindy, I was this is fantastic. So this is the beauty of what you do. You just deconstructed this complex ecosystem so fast and quickly. My question was more on the analytics side. Like, is there a separation of AI and ML, or is AI and I'll just take it to the next level, or are we going to see it just one product? And how do you see the BI space subcategories?
Yeah. So I see them, if you think of the continuum of skill sets, I think that is very important. What are the tools that the data scientists need? So the professionals that can munge data, can write code, do want to package up different things, maybe in a Jupyter notebook or what have you. And then I want you to think of the business user and of the data professional, the analyst. So will there be some convergence? Yes. But will we still have dedicated tools depending on the persona creating the content? I think we will continue to have that. Otherwise, you risk sacrificing something like ease of use for that persona. But what we want, and I think what we finally have because of the cloud, because of open APIs, is that we have an ecosystem where you can connect and call these different applications. So if I'm in Thoughtspot and I use our AI generated insights, so if I use it's called Spot IQ in Thoughtspot, if I generate an outlier detection, I can actually look which algorithms were used, which attributes, or if I'm talking to a data scientist, they would call this a feature, which features were input into that model. That might get me to a faster, let's say, focus area that then that either the data analyst or business user can pass it off to the data scientist and say, can you focus on this customer segment? I think we have the most churn there. And then it accelerates the time for the data scientist. Now, the data scientist might work in their separate tool of choice. Again, varies, but and then they might create a model that they want to then integrate within the visualization layer. Does that answer your question, Sanjeev?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it does. And also, are there like different types of visualization and intelligence? You gave a very good breakdown of the end-to-end ecosystem. So are there real-time streaming intelligence products? Are there batch? Are there ones that do only data transformation? So is there something like that, like the different specializations in this space?
Well, streaming data is its own interesting, unique challenge. But for sure, I think what is different now, and that data and analytics leaders need to pay attention to, is that because the technology has changed, and because we were constrained in an on-premises world, there were data modeling design choices that you had to make based on that limited compute and the price performance difference.
Right.
So we had to do things before, like creating cubes or creating aggregate tables to get good performance. In these cloud data platforms, we are not seeing the need for that. And so in the BI tool, moving the data, replicating the data is not a good idea. You should not have to be doing that. Cubes are a legacy approach that we just shouldn't be doing.
So absolutely. In fact, that's what I was trying to understand, in this modern changing world, how things, going to be different, even from the analytics point of view. You mentioned some thought that crossed my mind was, you mentioned that Thoughtspot started in 2012. So that means this is a 10th anniversary of Thoughtspot,
Yes.
and which is great because that means the 2012 was a busy year, because I also had Amazon Redshift episode, because it's also 10 years of Amazon Redshift and 10 years of Snowflake. And
Yeah.
then I'm soon going to have an episode on Apache Parquet, which is a file format for columnar data warehouse kind of analytics. And it's also the 10th anniversary of that product.
Yes. Now, but I do have to qualify something.
You,
So for Amazon Redshift, is it really 10 years? What were the origins of Amazon Redshift? It was par Excel. So that
yeah,
that technology existed beforehand. But you can
right.
go back and say, yeah, 10 years ago is when, let's say, some of these cloud data platforms were born.
Mhm.
And if you know Mike Ferguson, an
Mhm.
independent analyst
He
who
runs a
is
big
chair
data
for Big
London.
Data London, yeah, he
Yeah.
and I actually co-authored the first research study on
Oh,
cloud 10 years ago.
oh
It's like,
wow.
finally now cloud is a thing. But at that point in time, it was really the smaller businesses that were willing to embark on
Mhm.
cloud data warehousing then, and cloud BI. And some of those products in that early days no longer exist. But so Thoughtspot 10-year anniversary, and that is a shift for us as well. We started in an on-premises world,
Mhm.
and in the last 2 years have shifted to a full software as a service platform, and cloud now makes up the majority of our net new revenues.
Oh wow. So and how long have you been with them now? 2 years?
Um, yeah, no, 3 years, six
Oh,
months, and 3 days.
oh wow, and you're not counting. So
No, I logged on to some system today that gave me the actual
oh
count,
wow.
but yeah,
So it's
three
been
three and a
three
half
years?
years.
Okay, because
Yes.
I still remember I had seen you at the Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando that year. So 3 years ago, what made you jump to ThoughtSpot? Like, what was it about ThoughtSpot that attracted you?
Yes. So my decision to leave Gartner was not one that I took lightly. I actually thought and hoped that Gartner would be the last job, my chapter
Hmm.
3 in the
Oh,
industry. I think of chapter 1, I was making things happen in one company, Dow
mhm.
Chemical. My
I,
chapter 2 was really my own consulting.
mhm,
And then my chapter 3, I looked at Gartner and felt like that is industry wide, and I can scale my impact. And the Gartner that I joined was not the same company that I left. I
mhm,
was brought in to improve some of the research and strengthen some of that. And looking at some shifts there, the time I could spend with customers
mhm,
was decreased, and yet that's why we do all of this. I'm not into tech because it's just cool tech. I'm into tech that solves a business problem. And as my time with customers was diminished while I was at Gartner, I felt like, all right, what am I going to do? Am I going to go work for an end customer? And a good friend of mine said, Cindi, that's almost going back to like chapter 1 of your career. Really, it's how will you scale your impact? And I thought back to something my dad once said to me. There's 3 types of people: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and
mhm,
people who say, what the hell happened? And
mhm,
so I felt like I was making things happen um, to a certain level, giving advice at Gartner, but I wasn't making things happen about what we need the products to do to solve these tough business problems. So I feel like working at Thoughtspot, it lets me make things happen across the industry and solving those business problems. If I think about why this tech company, I was writing about search as a way of democratizing data insights 5 years before Thoughtspot was founded. So I knew this was a way to make data easier for people to get to. I had evaluated different vendors before Thoughtspot came along, and none of them really actually scaled. Thoughtspot was the first company I evaluated where the technology scaled, and then they had the best customer references. I mean, some of them I can name, some of them I can't. But when you think about great brands like Hulu, Verizon, and in Europe, British Telecom, that's like hallowed ground, Vanguard, working with big companies like this. The cloud has enabled us to shift to, digital natives as well, whether it's Huel, for example, spoke at a recent conference, the Modern Milkman, I mentioned, number of these open table, great tech companies. So I think I think about the customers. The product that we have is unique. That attracted me. The customers attracted me. And then this very unusual role that they created that allows me the time to work with our customers so they can execute on their strategies. But it also lets me shape our product strategy and capabilities as well.
That is
was a long answer.
no, but this was, see, the best part about this podcast, for people who are watching, this is going in all directions that I never expected. So now we've even gone back to, why you left Gartner, which I had no idea. So thank you so much for, being candid and, sharing your mission in life and how you want to make an impact. So I think this is fantastic. One thing that struck me was you said, again, this is all unscripted, so just going with the flow here. So you mentioned that more than half our Thoughtspot's sales are now in the cloud. So that leads me to two questions. What was it 3 years and how many days ago you joined? Second question I have is, we talk about cloud being all around us. It's cloud every day, 24/7, we hear cloud. But then you hear from even people like Andy Jassy when he goes to reInvent, and he talks about how vast majority of data is not in the cloud. I mean, by vast majority, we talk about 70, 80%. So are we forgetting them? Or is Thoughtspot?
No. And also, I have to correct you. I have to parse your words there. So, and I'm never sure, like, I feel like our CFO has to bless anytime I say numbers.
Yes.
And I did post on this. I wrote a blog post while I was in India. When will Thoughtspot IPO? And so whatever I put in there is what I'm allowed to share. But I want to parse it. I said our new revenues, the majority are cloud.
Okay.
What is our recurring revenues from on premises? I wouldn't be allowed to share that split, and two, I don't know it off the top of my head. But no, we're definitely not forgetting that. But this is also where there's, if I think back pre-COVID, 2019, I would have discussions with our large customers, and they're like, what's happening with the cloud? When should we think about it? What's everyone else doing? And that would be by sector, healthcare, financial services later. Some of the, pioneers here, I remember fall 2019, Chick-fil-A, very early to Amazon Redshift, Hulu, very early to Snowflake, and Thoughtspot, that integration there. And the line was out the door at the conference rooms that's fall 2019. Wow. I think what's happened, there is now not a single customer that I deal with that is not saying, help me get faster to the cloud. And I wish I could name names, how they've accelerated those timelines, but that's really in everyone's strategic plans. It's just a question of when, not if. And if I think Gartner actually put out a stat that 75% of the data will be for analytics will be in a cloud by the end of this year, if I remember that correctly.
So the pandemic seems to have been a big inflection point that pivoted people to the cloud?
Yes, definitely.
Right. Yeah. And what is the most asked capabilities of Thoughtspot? I know you have a heavy emphasis on natural language. So can you talk about like what differentiates Thoughtspot?
Yes. So the big thing, and I hesitate to use the term natural language because people associate that with, let's say, chatbots and voice. And what we do is a combination of search and natural language. Search is much more mature. Think about a Google search.
Yeah.
It indexes everything. We index everything, partial words, fragments, but then we overlay and enhance it with natural language, such as synonyms or certain keywords like versus or this year or top or bottom. None of those are indexed. This is some of the natural language. And it's patented. So the other products are not patented. The imitators, those gray market, they're not patented. We patented that and pioneered that category. And we do both. Some of our competitors, they tend to do more just natural language, which is less mature. And so you get erroneous results. We give you very accurate results. And I do think that is what Thoughtspot is known for. But really, with this shift to the cloud, we call it the modern analytics cloud platform, because that search is just one capability that is foundational, but you overlay it with a consumer grade ease of use interface. We benchmark ourselves not to other BI vendors. We benchmark ourselves to consumer grade apps like Spotify, for example, or even Twitter. So we have the idea of trending and followers that show you the live boards. It is also the AI generated insights. It's the open APIs for you to create data products. So this is through Thoughtspot Everywhere and that open ecosystem.
So one of the things I also keep hearing is that there's a huge emphasis on parsing the data to find relationships that either are not even obvious, and knowledge graph gets mentioned a lot of times. Is there a knowledge graph component under Thoughtspot?
Yes. And so we actually have our own graph database as part of the product. And so this shows the relationships between different objects that somebody would create in the platform. But I think what you're really talking about is the outlier detection that will tell you what you didn't know to look for in your data.
I see. Okay. You know, it reminded me of, sorry, mentioning one of your competition, but you know the space so well. Click has had this associative technology for a very long time, where I think about 15 years ago, this is what they had set out to do. Is that correct?
Yes, Click did have that, but that is a different capability and use case.
How is it different?
It's not AI generated insights. You're asking me. Well, so yeah, what they were really doing, I would say, is more in SQL terms, a complex select statement or in and out set analysis. Let's call it that.
Okay, sounds good. Great. And, you know, we can go on talking more about it. I'm just curious, data sharing is also another big thing, creating exchanges and marketplaces. Is that something that Thoughtspot provides or is on the roadmap? I know you can't talk about the future, but
Oh, no. I mean, I would say we as an analytics platform uniquely support that because we don't require you to replicate the data. So your database platform, whether it's Google BigQuery or Snowflake, it's where do you store the data? ThoughtSpot is connecting to it and not replicating it. In fact, in New York last week, at the Snowflake Data Cloud Summit, you heard Verisk talk about how they are using ThoughtSpot and using some of the data sharing capabilities within Snowflake to surface that.
Very nice. That is great. So, Cindi, we have just 10 minutes left. I have one last question about the product, and then we move to the next section. So right now, we started by saying in this current market situation, which, we are seeing signs of slowdown happening, we have gone from optimizing for performance to optimizing for cost. And FinOps is a very big topic. What FinOps related capabilities are there in ThoughtSpot?
Well, and I do. So Sanjeev, I would love to know, because you talk cross industry too. What are you seeing? Did you agree with my comment that the one tech sector that people are not scaling back on are data analytics and AI? But the way I look at this is that I don't think we're only optimizing for efficiency. You can only go so far for cost cutting. Then you really have to retain your best customers, service them, personalization, and that whether your revenues are going to be flat or growing, that depends somewhat on the market you're in. I think it's important to point out there's some interesting research. This book, Radically Human, it was on the Data Chief blog, top 10 must-read books this year. And they analyzed analytics leaders and laggards. And they have a new term that I quite like, the leapfroggers. So the people that were not investing in data and analytics until, let's say, the last 2 years, they're late to cloud, late to augmented analytics. The leapfroggers actually were able to grow their revenues 4 to 5 times the laggards, and even faster than the analytics leaders. So even if you're late, I think there's hope here. So I don't want you thinking FinOps just cost efficiency. We should still be thinking about growing market share, growing revenue.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's how you get a sticky customer. When you're so compelling that, it's a delight to use the product. It's not like I have to go to work and I'm forced to use this product. You actually want to use the product because it's showing you, the search is making it so easy to unearth the information that was hidden away someplace. You didn't even know it existed. Now it's at your fingertips.
Yeah. So I love this quote. One of our customers in Germany shared this. They felt like a kid in the candy store because they could see their data in a way that made it fun. Or another person said, I'm not a data analyst. I'm just a pricing optimization person.
I love it.
And thank goodness they had ThoughtSpot because their data analyst left. And if they had not been using ThoughtSpot, he wouldn't have been able to get to these insights himself. So.
And Cindi, you asked me, what am I seeing in terms of data? Like you, after 30 years of being in this industry, I'm literally having a time of my life. Data has arrived. This is a golden era of data. And for the first time, people are thinking less about infrastructure, security. All of that is super important, but let the cloud providers handle that. The business value of what I do is in my data, leveraging that data, like you said, to deliver more decisions and better decisions. and
Yeah.
faster decisions. That is why data is having its time of the day. I
Yeah.
feel.
So you're not seeing a slowdown
No.
either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I see slowdown like in social media, for instance.
Yeah.
We hear about Meta, and even Netflix has slowed down in terms of their original content, from what I hear in Hollywood, etc., but not data per se. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that is fantastic. I'm going to ask you some personal questions. For example, what are some interesting jobs and tasks that caught you by surprise and you had to learn quickly on your feet?
You mean, what do you mean? I don't- Like,
You're in your fourth chapter.
uh,
So how did you were there tasks that you were like, oh, how am I supposed to do this? Imposter syndrome. Do you deal with imposter syndrome?
oh, of course I deal with imposter
Okay,
syndrome.
tell us more.
Absolutely. But I would say everything I've learned
Mhm.
has largely been self-taught. I mean, in Switzerland, I remember my commute on the train was 2 hours in each direction. And how geeky am I? But I taught myself basic, and then I read a SQL book, and then I was a Novell network engineer. I did take some classes to learn that. In the last 3 years, what if I had to learn on my own? Well, there's some things in Slack that drive me crazy because I miss messages. Um, and then I am a continuous learner. Last year I took a certificate class on digital transformation from MIT. I felt like it was important. There's some things with blockchain that I just can't get my mind around. And so I wanted to fill in the gaps. And then the joke was on me because 3/4 of the class was really about the role of data in digital transformation, but that was also very validating for me. I still struggle with blockchain, and given that that market's falling apart, maybe I need to
Yeah,
stop
yeah,
agonizing over that.
good choice. Yeah.
If I had more time, though, I would spend much more on some of the NLP and what's happening. Yeah,
Mhm.
there. But it's all
You-
about time
yeah,
management.
right. And you have kept your love for reading even till today, right? Because you're an
Yes.
avid reader.
Yeah.
What are you reading these days?
Well, so two things. One, as we just published the top 10 books for data and analytic leaders, I
I
had to give
see.
myself a break, but I loved this book from Tim Harford. This
The
this
Data Detective.
I
Oh, wow.
really, yeah, the data detective. But here's the funny thing. Okay, so I'm reading this book, Remarkably Bright Creatures, because I belong to our neighborhood book
Uh-huh.
club, and the host always chooses.
Ah,
And so this is this month's book club. It's
okay.
it's about an octopus
Oh, wow.
that escapes and befriends somebody. So I read the description. I'm like, I don't want to read this, and yet it's the best book of 2022. And I was complaining about this to my daughter, who's a marine biologist. I'm like, this is too far fetched. And she says, Mom, I told you about that book months ago, and you said it didn't sound like your type of thing. I'm like, well, now I
Yeah.
have to read it. And she did tell me that actually these octopi are very, they are mischievous and they actually are brilliant. So I was looking on YouTube, all these funny things that they do. So it's quite
That's interesting.
interesting.
By the way, talking about books, Chris Borg from Data Kitchen, he asked me to read this book, Whole
Whole,
Earth.
okay. Whole
This
Earth.
is the story
Great.
of Stuart Brand. I like reading biographies and getting inspiration, so I just
Yeah.
started reading this book. So
Oh, very good. Good to know you're a reader too.
yeah, yeah. And another question. Again, I'm putting you on the spot because we haven't talked about it. How many countries have you been to?
Oh, I have no idea. I think I just had and if you're hearing the dog barking in the background, sorry, it's like walk time. He gets
Ah,
impatient at about this
yeah.
time. But um You know, I had to fill this in. I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's see. Well, I lived in Switzerland for 8
Nice.
years. My husband is from England, so we go there a lot. Visited many of the European countries, so
Mhm.
you can keep count. France,
It's okay.
Germany. I love Italy,
Yeah.
Brazil. I loved. So going there. I hope to get back to Japan at one point. I will be in Australia next month. Super excited about that because I haven't been there now in 3 years. And India definitely was a transformative experience.
Mhm.
Next time I go there, I hope to explore the country, visit our team in Trivandrum and Hyderabad. Oh, and Israel. Israel's definitely a cool place to visit. Yeah.
Wow, very nice. So I'm going to ask you one last question because I know we're coming to top of the hour and the other people who are wanting of your time. So the last question I'll ask you is, tell us something about you the world does not know widely.
That's a hard one. That the world, maybe something a little bit unexpected
Yeah.
is that because I feel like what do they not know widely? Like if you met me today, you think, oh, she's living the dream,
Mhm.
and things are easy, but it's all very hard won. It's all very hard won, but I have spoken about that a few times. But what people close to me are surprised about is that I'm actually an introvert
Oh, wow.
and can be quite shy. And yet they're like, yeah, but you're always out there talking. You do public speaking. I'm like, do you have any idea? I still get very nervous about it because I want to do a good job. Um, and and what that means for an introvert is that it does take a lot of energy. So, Sanjeev, this has been a delight chatting with you. I
Thank
am
you.
thinking, what
Yeah.
did I say that I wish I could take back when you release this, or that I could have said better?
I,
But what happens afterwards is that I need time to recharge. I need to go for a walk. I need to read a book. And that's how introverts recharge, is with quiet time.
and being an introvert is actually quite an amazing thing. I learned it from the book Quiet by Susan Cain.
Ah, okay.
That
I
book,
should check that out.
oh, every introvert in this world must absolutely read that book, and you will see the power of being an introvert compared to an extrovert. It is,
Yeah,
it's an
interesting.
outstanding book. So, yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Cindi. It was my honor, my pleasure to have you on this episode. So great to connect with you again.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Likewise.